All right, let's dive right into today's explainer. We're unpacking a really fascinating story from Aaron Rose. And it starts, well, in a grand Victorian library in London. You know, you hear Victorian library, and you probably picture dusty old books, quiet reading rooms, maybe some tweed. But inside this specific library, the vibe is incredibly modern. Two engineers are sweating bullets over a high-stakes meeting. They've been building an internal AI system, and man, the pressure is absolutely on.
So setting the scene here, we've got Timothy, a junior engineer who is staring down a massive 9 a.m. deadline for tomorrow morning. His mission? He has to somehow justify the monthly cloud expenditure for their AI-provisioned throughput units. Now, that's essentially the guaranteed processing power for their AI models, and he has to justify this huge bill to both the university dean and the chief financial officer. If he bombs this, the project's budget gets totally slashed. Obviously, Timothy's a bit panicked. So, what does he do? He pulls up a standard Azure Monitor dashboard showing a pristine, flat 99.95% uptime. He's thinking, okay, this structural flawlessness, this is going to save me.
Well, enter Margaret. She's his senior software engineer colleague, and she just completely shatters his reliance on that perfect uptime metric. Actually, she doesn't even look up from her terminal when she drops this brilliant line. Uptime is a lazy metric. Think about that. She tells him that presenting a perfect uptime line, that only proves to the CFO that the machine is literally plugged into the wall. It does absolutely nothing to prove that anyone is actually getting smarter by using it.
Margaret hits on a really harsh reality here, one that I think a lot of technical teams out there face every day. Server pings are not going to save your budget. Why? Because the CFO honestly couldn't care less about API gateways dropping requests. The CFO wants to know if the application is actually solving human problems. This demands a total 180-degree shift in perspective. You have to move from measuring the infrastructure to measuring the human. The executives want to see the return on intelligence. So Timothy rightfully asks the million-dollar question: how exactly do we prove that?
To pull this off, they literally have to stop looking at standard web traffic and infrastructure measurements, period. Instead, Margaret switches her screen over to Azure Application Insights. If you aren't familiar, it's this incredibly extensible application performance management service. And this is the exact tool she's using to track the actual payload of human behavior. She's not just watching traffic anymore. She is tracking pure utility. So how did she do it? Margaret actually instrumented custom telemetry right into the library's application layer code. She's tracking session start to monitor actual faculty retention over time. She's looking at queries submitted to check the character length and targeted persona of the prompts. User action is a huge one. She's tracking explicit success indicators. Think about things like when a researcher physically clicks copy to clipboard or export citation. And maybe the most crucial one, query abandoned. This tracks when a user closes the terminal within just 5 seconds of getting an answer. Why? Because that signals a total failure of the search. It's brilliant. This is exactly how you track human utility.
Okay, so even with all this fantastic tracking in place, Timothy is still sweating. He knows the CFO is going to look at all the recent work they did fine-tuning the AI model and just dismiss it as some expensive academic novelty. So he asks Margaret, how do we prove the AI is actively improving based on our tweaks? How do we prove it's actually getting better at doing its job?
Margaret counters his anxiety by bringing up this fascinating concept she calls the silent no. See, before they fine-tuned the model, scholars were hitting this silent no all the time. The model's tone was just dense. It was off-target. And that meant these researchers were having to rephrase their complex historical prompts up to 4 times in a single session just to get one usable answer. It was a massive, completely hidden source of friction.
To isolate that very specific, frustrating user behavior, Margaret opens up the log analytics query blade. She needs the exact data on this friction, right? So she starts typing out a script using Kusto Query Language, or KQL. Now, KQL is this highly optimized language used to analyze those massive volumes of log data sitting over an Azure monitor. She writes a query that is specifically designed to isolate users who are rapidly rephrasing their questions within a tight 30-second window.
And the results are kind of mind-blowing. When she runs the KQL script, it generates this sharp downward curve, revealing a massive 62% drop in the prompt rephrase rate ever since they implemented their automated feedback loop and fine-tuned the model.
The 62% drop is the exact ammunition Timothy needs. It definitively proves that their fine-tuning wasn't just some abstract academic tweaking. It actually means that the scholars using the system are now finding the exact historical context they need on the very first turn. They ask a question, and boom, the machine immediately understands the nuance of the domain. The silent no is defeated.
But of course, Timothy brings up the elephant in the room. It's undeniably the CFO's biggest impending objection. Their primary, high-capability model tier, the one that's giving all these amazing answers, is significantly more expensive per token than their smaller, cheaper fallback model. He's panicking again. How on earth does he defend a premium price tag to a CFO who is strictly obsessed with the bottom line?
Well, Margaret reveals this absolutely stunning paradox about speed and capability. She maps Azure cost management data right alongside the session links. Now, check this out. With the old cheap model, sure, the tokens themselves cost less, but scholars were spending 11 minutes and burning through 12,000 tokens just going back and forth fighting with the AI to get an answer. But with the premium fine-tuned model, the average session drops down to just 3 minutes and it only consumes 4,500 tokens. The math here is just incredible. Even though they are paying a higher premium rate for every individual token, they're actually consuming a staggering 60% fewer tokens in total for every single research task. Because the model understands the nuance of the historical requests right out of the gate, the users just don't have to keep querying it over and over. Margaret taps her screen. She emphasizes to Timothy that this is the core point for tomorrow's meeting. The entire narrative completely shifts. They didn't just go out and buy a fancier, more capable AI, they mathematically optimized their token efficiency. By cutting out that user friction and eliminating the constant reprompting, they drastically cut overall token waste. It's a huge win.
Timothy looks back at the dashboard, and he's watching this live, real-time stream of custom events blinking green as the night shift researchers start logging in. The resulting metrics are bulletproof. They're sitting at an 84% faculty adoption rate. They have rock-solid week-over-week retention. And, the one the CFO will absolutely love, there is a direct, verifiable downward trend in the total tokens consumed per successful search. Looking at this data, Timothy's boardroom anxiety completely vanishes. It's replaced entirely by technical certainty. Timothy finally gets it. By taking these transactional application logs and mapping them directly to actual user value, the data completely frames the conversation. He realizes, and Margaret totally confirms this, that they aren't walking into that meeting to argue about what the technology costs anymore. No way. They are walking in there to show the CFO exactly what the technology saves. The metrics just do all the talking.
It is just such a brilliant shift in perspective, moving away from tracking infrastructure to tracking real, tangible value. So, the next time you open up your own cloud dashboards, or maybe you're prepping for your own intense budget meeting, I want to leave you with this ultimate question. Ponder this regarding your own return on intelligence. Are you just measuring your machine, or are you measuring your human?